You know, interestingly, we tend to assume everything about people around us on the streets, at homes, in schools, offices, wherever we are. We think that we have one uniform identity called being Indians or being Mexicans or being, Chinese and things like that. But if you look at any country, its history, its geography, you'll find that there are several layers to an identity that emerges as your own identity. That is a national identity at large. In India particularly, one finds that there are several other layers that also need to be taken into account when you understand an Indian as a person. It's the region, so it's the geography to which you belong. So if I say that I'm Tejaswini FG from Maharashtra, and somebody else says that I'm Devdutt Patnaik from Orissa, there's bound to be something that comes to your mind immediately about that identity, because these are two separate regions of the country which speaks volumes about themselves. So there's something about the region, there's something definitely about the religion, who you are, in the context of your religion. There's something about your gender, because this country has treated men and women differently. Their experiences, their socialization, their upbringing has been different. So who you are also tells you about, through your gender, we come to know who you are. You are also known by your caste identity. So when I say I'm Adhikari, there are two reactions I always get. Are you from Bengal or are you a Kayast? And I have to explain why I am from Maharashtra and not from Bengal, and yes, I am a Kayast, so I have to explain more. So your family name tells something about your caste. And last but not the least is the class in which you are born, and the class to which you belong. That also creates a certain set of experiences, eliminates certain experiences, and makes an identity of yours. Over and above that, increasingly, ethnic identity, which is actually a culmination of all these together, is something which is coming out very, very strongly. And therefore, I think these are several layers of Indian identity. As you go ahead, you will be able to see that communities' other identities also matter. Like, for example, apart from ethnic identity, it would also be to do with whether you are self-employed or whether you are a white-collared person. Whether you are a migrant or you are a transported person or you are a non-migrant rooted person in one place, Whether as a family you are a dink, that is double income, no kids kind of a couple, or are you, single, or are you working part-time, are you working full-time, all such things start defining you. And these are several layers that actually, if you put them together on a matrix, tell something about your behavior, tell something about your psychography, your attitude set, your choices, your aspirations, the way you engage in life. And therefore, I think the Biscope is to some extent to unveil the community's understandings and the several layers of identities that each one of us possesses as individuals. If community understanding is a thought, is a strategic intent of future group, it would be very important for us to democratize this thought, to explain to everyone around us in various ways, in simpler, cooler ways, what we mean by communities, what are their nuances, why are they relevant to us, how do we then make use of these understandings in our day-to-day living of, say, formats like Big Bazaar, Pantaloons, and for that, what do we have to do, and what kind of delight we would be able to create for the customer to experience inside our stores. So to be able to convey all of it, we'll have to find different ways, mechanisms by which we reach out. So I look at this conversation as a device, as a very impactful tool to be able to tell people what it is all about. It's very simple to actually describe or define a community. I'd only say that, aggregation of people together makes it into a community. So if you have parents waiting outside the gate of a school to get their children back home, it's a community of parents. And the students who come out of school to go back home are the community of children or students belonging to that particular school. So communities could be understood as simply as context specific of that kind. We could have a community of patients belonging to a public hospital, could have a community of patients affected by a particular thing like tsunami, So a group of people undergoing a similar experience is the other layer that one could talk about that defines a particular thing as community. Group of people also expressing explicitly certain kind of behaviors, or certain kind of choices. Say for example, community of homosexuals or gays, is a community which is explicitly expressing its choices of a particular sexual orientation, and that becomes a community in itself. People living in a particular geography, so all Mumbaikars, then that whether you are a Maharashtrian or you are a Bihari is not the question. We are Mumbaikars by attitude, by a particular way of behavior, and therefore that also becomes a community. So communities can be understood as, like I earlier said, geography specific, context experience specific, choices specific, or certain kind of behavior specifics. So when I say a particular community, I'm already opening up the whole understanding beyond ethnic identities and beyond caste identities. Although every time in India yet you'll hear the word community associated with a caste identity. While I was coming here, I saw Maheshwari Samaj, I saw Maheshwari Bhavan, I immediately get a sense that there is Maheshwari Marwari community which lives here, So my first interpretation of it is also going to start with ethnic identity, because that's the commonest association that we have grown up with as a country in India, that we are always divided by caste, So whether in hierarchy or otherwise, so within a caste again we have been divided by subcaste. And therefore all of us have a point of polarization, which is ethnic community. But apart from that, people live in experiences like we said earlier, and therefore we'll have to understand and encompass all those experiences as also the variants of community. We have tried doing very, very simple and interesting things to understand these, and find out how people are. So one of the tools and techniques we have used is to map the community. Say you take the map of Mumbai city, and first of all try mapping ethnic communities to find out what is the pattern that comes out. Interestingly, although Mumbai is so cosmopolitan, what you find is that people live in ghettos. Whether they are Gujaratis, so I call Bhuleshwar to Borivali as Gujarati belt, whether they are Maharashtrians, so you'll find them in erstwhile Pune like Thane kind of places, or in Girgaon and Chandni Road kind of places, or Dadar, and that too also the western part of Dadar which becomes very strong, Vileparle which is another. Eastern part of Vileparle is strongly Maharashtrian, and western part of Vileparle is dominantly Gujarati. So you find that when you map people out in terms of their locations, you find that there is ethnic affinity by which people settle down. You take an example of a very modest living community space like Dharavi, and you find that there are nagars which define the ethnic identity. So you have a Kunchi Korve Nagar, which tells you the community of Kunchi Korves whose occupation is makadwalas and jadu making, the entertainers and the broom makers, who live together. These are Adivasis who come to us from two places, Andhra Pradesh and Nasik, so they have settled in a particular way in Dharavi, and each Nagar tells you that it is of a particular ethnic identity. So using a map and plotting people in their ethnic identities on a map is a very simple tool by which you start understanding who people are. The other tool that has always worked with us to understand people is their living by the colonies. So you will find very interestingly that between the white collared and the self-employed, the white collared generally stay in the employee housing societies. Either they are given to them by their employer. Say for example, substantive part of Vikhroli belongs to Pirojsha Nagar, which is set up by Godrej for his own employees, Or you have the HDFC colonies, or you have the Sachivalaya colonies, and you have the LIC colonies, So you find people located in colonies by their occupations, and before they retire you have SBI officers complexes, or ONGC officers complexes, which is their own house where they shift after retirement, but that is plotted through their employment again, through their occupation again. So finding out and learning about housing colonies starts telling you about what people are up to, so they are into white collared employment, and therefore what is the living that they have experienced. So using house visit as a tool by plotting these colonies again of the self-employed versus the white collared also starts telling you about living of that particular set or subset of communities. Let's say for example you go to St. Xavier's College and get the ancient Indian culture department to talk to you, and you have only girls and one boy. That starts telling you about the choices people are making with their particular courses. That speaks volumes about why are girls seeking courses in culture versus where are boys going. If they are not present here, where are they? So all such questions, if you have to lead and build a query around them, these methods of focus group discussions, meeting them informally, home visits, plotting them on maps, visiting colonies and finding out, or visiting malls and shopping places, or going to the festivals where people come often.